Okay, I think we will just kick off and then others can join as they join. So this welcome to this evening's webinar. This evening we are looking at measure to manage, and tonight it's sheep. We're going to do another measure to manage next week where the feature will be on arable. Tonight we are part of the Opportunity Northeast Agritech programme. And we have got two fantastic speakers tonight, and Dan Robertson and Owen Gray. So getting into this evening's presentations, Dan, I'll ask you if you can maybe just bring your screen up. So Dan is going to speak to us first. Dan is one of the focus farmers in the One Agritech programme. And since coming into the programme has used various bits of data and has learned quite a lot about data and what to use and what actually makes an impact on the flock. So Dan, I'll hand over to yourself.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. So I'm Daniel Robertson. I farm at Titaboutie, which is beside Tarland in Deeside. Me and my dad, we got the opportunity to be the livestock farms for Opportunity Northeast, and as part of that, we've had really good sort of exposure to some new technologies. I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years thinking about, how to use these technologies best for the business. So that's kind of more or less what I'm going to be talking about tonight. Apparently it takes a little while for my slides to load up, so it might be a bit of a lag. But just giving you a quick overview of what we do at Titaboutie. I mean, a few of you have probably heard this whenever we've been talking about the farm before, but we're about 370 hectares, 150 sucklers, just shy of 700 ewes and hogs, and about 80 hectares of crop. So what I would say is quite a sort of normal sized mixed farm, very typical of the northeast of Scotland. What we do is we breed all of our replacements for cows and for sheep, and we finish everything from start to finish. So from our point of view, picking good maternal lines and stuff is extremely important. And it's obviously a family farm, so I run it alongside my dad, and we have a worker, Michael, as well. So when it comes to the sheep management, I'm going to focus just 100% on the sheep today, just to keep things simple. So when it comes to my approach to sheep management and data, I think, so those of you who don't know, I did a degree in engineering and worked in engineering for a few years before I came home to the farm 3 years ago. So I've got a slightly different background in that respect. But even coming into farming, thinking I was kind of a data guy and an engineer and stuff, we got into this project, we started collecting all this data, and I just completely overwhelmed by it. I didn't know what to do with it. I had so much data on my sheep and it wasn't helping me in the slightest. So I started to think about something I'd learned on a trip to New Zealand a few years ago, where a farmer had told me that a good system will always get you 90% of the way there. Like, technology is not going to revolutionize your business; it's only going to help. And that's where I sort of decided, that the process 100% has to be the priority. If you've got a bad process, doesn't matter how much data you gather, all it's going to tell you is that you've got a bad process, and it's probably going to take you 2 or 3 years to get there. So I think it's super important to focus on the process first and then use the data as part of that. So looking forward, my aim is to sort of streamline the system. It's a lot to do with what they call lean management in engineering, but it's basically just doing things efficiently. So the most important thing is to maximize your value add. So that's your meat kilograms gained, minimize your inputs. Most importantly, time. I think time is one of those areas that is getting a lot of attention at the moment, and rightly so. I think it's an area where we're all quite bad at being inefficient. And reducing losses, just trying to work out where we're making mistakes that are causing animals to die. So in terms of how I went about this process was the first stage was to actually start thinking about my process in a much more detail. So one of the things that we do commonly if you're doing process engineering is that you map out the process and literally write down what you're doing and just look at it for a bit and work out if there's any sort of obvious inefficiencies staring you in the face. So that's one of the things I did. I started looking at, how we use the different mobs, how many mobs we're running, when we're making decisions, how we're sorting them out, how we're moving them around the farm. So here's the sort of flowchart on the right here that shows how we go from spent lambs to slaughtered lambs at in lamb hogs, and on the left how we go from spent ewes to in lamb ewes. And then carrying on from that, it's looking at how we get from in lamb ewes right back to spent ewes and spent lambs. So this is something I would encourage anybody to do. It doesn't take that long, it doesn't take any resources, but it's just good to actually sort of put it all down on paper and think about why you do things the way you do them and the order in which you do them. But out of this, I started to think about how this all works. Sort of, the thing about the sheep is it's an endless cycle. It's like, you're tupping them, you're lambing them, you're spending them, you're tupping them, you're lambing, it goes on and on and on. So by using the flowchart, I've sort of managed to break what we do down into 10 distinct phases. So what you see here is each phase is in the blue circles, the approximate date of phase change is in the green squares, and the action that changes the phase is in the yellows. So some of these phases are very simple, like tupping. Some of these phases are more, full on like lambing. But the idea is that each of these phases has its own characteristics, its own targets. It's got different types of mobs. You've got, sometimes you can have 6 different mobs post lambing. Sometimes you run in just 2 mobs. So each phase has its own distinct features about it. So what's the sort of point of all this? Well, the point is really to identify these 2 things, which were identify the distinct phases within the sheep process and identifying the actions between the phases. When I look at the distinct phases, I need to look at things like the number and type of mobs we have, the nutrition targets we have. So, if you look at something like your post, between tupping and scanning, your nutrition targets are, not really super important. You're just trying to keep them alive. You're trying to keep them in reasonable condition. Whereas if you look at your pre-lambing nutrition targets, it's a very different kettle of fish. And it's the same thing with things like common ailments. So, in the summer, you're looking at, really big worm pressure. In the winter, you're looking at feet problems. So it's just identifying, what characterizes each phase. And then the outcome of that is we start to look at what the performance targets for each phase are. So how many ewes am I expecting to lose? What condition score am I wanting to achieve? What land growth rates do I want in this period and that period? That's the kind of things I'm trying to identify. So this thing on the right, the DMAIC is pronounced, I suppose, but this is something called Six Sigma. It's a lean methodology, but basically this is at the core of improving a process. So you define what you're trying to do, you measure how you're performing, you analyze the results of that, then you improve the process, and then you control the process to, make sure that improvement sticks. And I think the define is where a lot of stuff gets missed. I think, everyone's talking about data, everyone's talking about new technology, and it's measure, 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 measure. But I don't think not anybody, I think a lot of people are forgetting to actually define, what the problem is, what we're trying to measure, what's the problem we're trying to solve. So by making the distinct phases, I have a defined sort of problem or target for each phase. And that's where the measuring will become much more powerful. I'll know exactly what I'm trying to measure. The other side of this is looking at the actions between the phases. So sometimes it's a case of, if you're spending, you're sorting the lambs and the cows, you're putting the fat in the thin. Sometimes it's a case of drafting, sometimes it's a case of drafting and treating, sometimes it's a case of just adding the tups. But by looking at the actions specifically and looking at what we're trying to achieve, we can look at how to minimize the amount of effort and stress the action is having. What's the most efficient way of achieving this? And another thing that I've added to this is that how can we integrate data collection into this action without adding any extra work? How can we make the action part of the data collection? And also the other side of that is how can we use data to help with this action? So if it's things like sorting out for culls, how can we get the data in a position where we've identified ewes that are not performing, and how can we make that data, usable during those actions? So to talk a little bit about our current practices, one of the primary ones is something that Kirsten got us onto at the start of this project, which is tagging at birth. Now, this isn't going to work for every system, but I know that there's lots of techniques where people manage to do tagging at birth in a sort of New Zealand style system. But if you can find a way to make it happen, this is something I would highly recommend. So we lamb about 600 in about 3 weeks, and I would say tagging at birth adds probably 20 minutes of work per day to my lambing schedule. And that's with me tagging and recording everything personally. So when we tag, we're recording the mothering score, the lamb vigor, and the ease of birth. That's kind of the 3 things that we record at birth. We don't bother with the birth weight. We just find that too awkward to try and get an accurate birth weight. But yeah, I think this gives you probably some of the most important data you're going to use, and it makes the rest of the year an absolute breeze because they don't pull their tags out, and it means that every time you're going to handle them, every time you're going to jag them, you've got an EID tag there ready to go.
I think we have lost Dan just for a moment. I think his internet must have gone out. So just while he is reconnecting, we have completely lost him now. So just while he is reconnecting, I'll maybe just highlight to you with Opportunity Northeast, with the Agritech programme, we have got a website that has got a huge range of information on it. And I'll just pop the link for that into the chat, so you've got that there for reference. And in there, you'll find a whole host of information. And when Dan was speaking there about some of the kit that he's using, the likes of the combi clamp, there's some information there on how he's found using that as well, along with some other tech that they have been using as well. So hopefully his internet will kick back into touch, and we can have him joining us again. I think it's really interesting what he was speaking about there, given that he's talking about time, because time is something that people really, I would say, undervalue or don't often think about. You think about the costs of, like, variable costs of feed, of medicines and that type of thing, but actually thinking about your own time and where you're using your time the most or least is a really interesting side to look at it. So it's good to hear his side there. If he cannot join us just now, he will come back. I'm reassured he will definitely come back. Owen, I wonder if we just skip forward to your presentation while Dan is going to rejoin us. It seems a bit funny hearing half a presentation then going to the next, but I'm sure his internet has just gone, so it was playing up a bit before we started. So we'll maybe just skip to Owen. Owen, we're really lucky actually tonight to have these guys, because they're both at different places of tech, and that we've started to hear from Dan about where they're kind of feeling their way with tech and what's working and how they're thinking of time. Whereas Owen is at the other end of the journey, where they're using tech really much to make a lot of the decisions. And where you guys had said earlier on when we were doing the poll of this making decisions as data-driven decisions is very much where Owen is with Saughland. So Owen, if okay, I will just hand over to yourself.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. Hopefully I don't count as well, but I'm on good internet at the minute, so we should be fine. So a rundown of Saughland Farm. We're a bit further south than maybe a lot of yous will. We're just south of Edinburgh in Midlothian. We're mainly sheep and beef. We do have a little bit of arable as well. And the farm consists of myself, the livestock manager, Ben McClymont, the farm manager, and Catherine Howells, the stock person, sorry. On top of that, the farm is owned by Richard Callender. So on the left here, I'll give you a little bit of a rundown about what we have. We've got 1350 Romney ewes. They used to be more Aberfield based, but through data, which we'll talk about, we moved towards the Romney. Just they were working better for us. We also breed our own replacements in ewe lambs, which we lamb as many of them as we can, usually to something easy lambing like a Shetland, so it doesn't cause us a lot of grief, but gives us a little bit extra income. On top of that, we added the 20 pedigree Suffolks. Now, they were established 4 or 5 years ago. The reason behind that was to give us a little bit more control. We had sort of self-replacing sheep and we wanted a bit more control. So bringing a terminal sire into the mix, it let us breed our own Suffolks that could perform in an outdoor lambing scenario. Because as I'll go into it, most of our outdoor lambing, that's what we do. We do a little bit indoors. We tend to bring triplets in and twin hogs in. Just we've found we lose a bit more of them outside, and we're trying to run triplets as triplets, so it takes a bit more managing. We also run an A flock, B flock system. So A flock breeds the replacements, for any who don't know what that is, and the B flock is any problematic sheep that have been demoted from the A flock. So they'll go to a terminal sire, so we don't keep any replacements on them. On the other side, we also run cattle. We've got them as a grassland manager. They help the sheep and just another enterprise. It's a Hereford and Angus crisscross, back and forward, whatever we need. We'll put a bit more Hereford in if we need a bit more Angus. A lot of them resemble sort of a black baldy is probably the closest way you'll see them. So we're running 85 cows with that and usually calving around 15 heifers at 2 indoors. But what we do is we outwinter them, usually on bale grazing and thing, and then we bring them indoors in the spring. So yeah, a Hereford and Angus crisscross of cows is how we work it. A lot of them resemble a black baldy is what they resemble. So there's 85 cows and 15 heifers calving down at 2. They are outwintered on bale grazing and thing, and then after that we move them indoors to calve inside. We've just found we can do a good job of calving indoors, so why calve outdoors? We get high success with that. So on to the next slide. So when I got asked to do this webinar, I had a bit of a think, and I thought, what would I want to know when I started out in data? And probably I was a bit like Dan, and I collected too much. I had this big lot of information, what I couldn't really do a lot with. So I had to think about it, and I came up with this idea with the sheep. And basically, it's the steps you should do before you collect any data. So the first one being, what do you want to achieve? What's your goals? And I suppose Dan touched on a lot of that, is where do you want to take the business? Why do you want to achieve it? So always ask yourself why. It's all very well having a goal, but if it might not be the right goal when you actually question it. And then the next step is when the data usually comes in. So how will you achieve it? So what data sets do you actually need to achieve your goals? And that's something I wish probably if I could have gone back, I'd asked myself a lot more and probably not wasted as much time. And then on to the next important thing I think I've missed out is, this is a little novelty thing I did, level the playing field it's called. So basically there's lots of variations that affect genetics of animals and your improvement. So you could fall down the route of thinking the livestock's the problem or something else is the problem, but what I think is the 4 things that you need to have right before you collect any data is this. So it starts first and foremost with animal health. If you've got different challenges across the farm, you can't compare them equally. If there's one group that's got a heavy worm burden, hasn't been wormed, the other group, what's not got any worms, is going to grow faster. So really bigger mobs managed similar helps to sort of pick the right animals opposed to dismissing them because of something else. Accurate data, I think this will be the most difficult one for everybody, and it's a bit of don't push yourself too hard. Don't try and get everything, get the important things, because there's a lot of this technology a lot of people haven't used before, young people, old people, whatever. But keep it as simple as possible. We've had all sorts of systems from really complicated to really simple. So yeah, that has helped simplifying systems and what everybody can use. Nutrition, another big one. We basically need to make sure all the animals you're comparing are getting the right nutrition, because again, it'll affect lambing, it'll affect calving and things. So keep the nutrition level across. I mean, it's easy to say that, but as best you can. And then finally, genetic evaluation. We've got great firms out there. Signet is one of them. What probably isn't used enough. And the reality of it is, we as farmers probably don't know enough about heritability of traits and things. And I've found myself going down a rabbit hole of chasing a trait that's going to take me 20, 30 years to make any difference, when I could have been putting work into something more viable. So it's actually using the traits, what you might get quick gains. And then once you've got those quick gains you need to make money, then move on to these smaller traits after that. So a bit on to how we do it here. This is just an overview of more of the data sides and what I think has made us a bit of money. So we've got a self-replacing flock that obviously cuts disease, and this year we've decided to start breeding our own rams for the maternal side as well. Previously we've bought tups from Innovis and YRA Romneys, but I just find that the sheep are at a point where they're working exactly how I want them to, and if I can breed my own, I can make progress a bit faster. Key points of data collection. Again, we'll go through that in the next slides. You don't need it all. You need a certain bit of it, whatever. I mean, if you've got a huge foot problem, you maybe want a lot of foot data, but if you've got a huge lambing problem, you want to look at lambing assistance, things like that. So that's probably that. So using on-farm technology, we have a lot of technology. I wouldn't even say too much, but we have a lot. There's a picture there. The plate meter is one of them. That's a vital piece of equipment that makes us a lot of money every year. That, along with the sword stick from QMS, which it doesn't sound like technology, but I'm classing it a bit as cardboard as technology. We also have XR5000 weighheads, XRS2 stick reader, and we've always had sort of auto drafting systems, but we've just purchased a new Titaboutie auto drafter. So we've got a lot of technology, but it has paid us dividends to have that and gave us the gains we need, or quick gains, I would say. Technology will get you there quicker than anything else. Again, I touched on grassland management, and I'm not going to go into it because it's a wormhole, but it's a major thing on the farm that if your grass isn't right, your stock are never going to be right. Animal health, we touched on that before, but be adaptive with it. Use the technology to improve your animal health. We'll monitor lamb growth through worms and stuff like that. So, and then on to Signet breeding, sheep breeding services. We use that for Suffolks. We use that going forward for our maternal lines, and it works. I mean, there's a bit of stigma that chasing sheep for figures, you end up with ugly looking sheep and things like that, but you don't have to keep the ugly sheep just because it's good figures. You can still pick the best of what you want to pick. So it's always a straight comparison with other things. And then recently with the Suffolks, we've started CT scanning, and there's a picture in the background of the Suffolk going through. But the data set that gives us is tremendous. And in reality, it gives us the lamb as a carcass. So we can really pick out outliers, great sires there, what we would never know, and use them. And what it actually does is it increases your accuracies of what those lambs are going to breed. So what you see is what you get on the figures wise sort of thing. Birth recording of priority stock. So this is maybe a bit different to what Dan touched on. We don't have the labour availability to be recording everything from birth. We're lambing outside, so it's a bit of what do we need to record. We were involved with ram compare, so we were recording everything at that stage, but now my terminal sired lambs, so my B flock, aren't as important to actually record. I'm not keeping replacements from them. The Suffolks are doing the side of breeding a quicker, fatter lamb. So what we record is we record the A flock, and we'll try and record all of them from birth right through. We'll aim for things like scan weight to reduce days to slaughter and use Signet to evaluate all this. So now I'm going to go a bit through the year and what we do, and I've tried to. Some of the things we do is we've got a lot of kit to do it, and there's ways you can do it without using all the kit. So our year looks a bit. Condition scoring and weighing comes in throughout the year, and it's not just. It's actually knowing the individuals. So if you're analysing scanning data, say, and you've had a really bad scan, you want to know the condition score they used before they went to the tip, because was it that? Was it a tip? Was it something else? But without that data set, you'll never know. There's so many variables. You can do that on a percentage basis of the flock. You could do a tally sheet, or if you've got the kit, you can do individual and have everyone and actually start selecting for sheep that can hold their condition. Which rams go to the ewes? So that's simple. A lot of people just write it down on a bit of paper, but it's an overlooked one. We want to remember that. Because you're going to need that when you're looking at lambing assistance later on and things like that. And for us, it's a big thing. Like so with Suffolks, we want to make sure the Suffolks are able to lamb outside once they're crossed and they're able to get up and go. They've got vigor. So if we're going down the wrong way, we need to know that. Grassland availability. It's probably one we've overlooked here in the past. And scanning's maybe not been what it should. We've maybe had more numbers than we should have had. When we brought in the plate meter, we basically wound that back and we made sure we had enough grass at certain points of the year and turned it around almost overnight. So you can never go past the sort of nutritional side. You need to have that right before you start worrying about any data at all. Weather's a big thing, and it's not really farm, but it's farm data. But if you've had a really bad tipping, take note of that. Basically, you want to know when you're looking at these scanning results why they're wrong, why they're right, and try and find the trends. Because if you find the trends why things are good or bad, you can then progress so that you can minimize these risks. And weather's a difficult one, but yeah, worth recording. So scanning data, it's probably, if you've got a stick reader, you can record it. I mean, all it involves is running the sheep through after the scan man's been. You can shed them into their lots and read them with a stick reader. You then get individual data. You can track those ewes throughout their life to see, is there ewes that have singles every year? Is there ewes that have twins every year? If you're breeding your own replacements, you can then remove some of these single breeders, or vice versa. If you don't want triplets like us, you can take them out. So, but also on the other end of the scale, we have an XR5000 wayhead from True Test, and that links directly to the scan man's scanner. So when he presses the button to say it's having 3, it comes through, and all we need to do is read the tag at the time. So that really saves the labor of doing it afterwards. So it's another bonus of having technology. Then we move on to lambing. And Kirsten might be delighted to see the live lambs. She is there still, so that was a project we started quite a while ago, and it's still running. Condition scoring again. The main difference at lambing though is these poor ewes. You can actually, if they're really poor condition, they've never picked up. Take note of their EID tag or a number, or put a notch in its ear. Do something so you can get rid of it later. You can give them more care. So if we've got lean ewes, bring them into the shed. We're indoor and outdoor system, so you're saving lambs that way. So you kind go past that. And then on to individual lamb loss. Now, the table you see on the right-hand side is the live lambs table, and anyone can do it. You can download it online, and basically if you see if a lamb is dead, when you're putting it in the bin, you write on this table why that lamb is dead, essentially. End of the year, you tally all these up and see where you've gone. Now, the chart below it is basically the reasons we lost lambs. So this is what you get out of doing the above. And that's been a main driver in change to the Romney. 3 or 4 years ago, hung lambs was at the top of that list, so big lambs. And now you can see it's what, 18 lambs we've lost last year from being big. And so to me, that was a main driver, and it's made lambing easier, it's made everything easier, it's made everybody happier, I suppose. Not licked again has been huge this year. We bring in a lot of hogs to get rid of some older ewes this year, so there's a lot of ewe lambs lambing, so that's why that's high. So some really interesting data that you compare year on year. You can also do it, which we do with some EID individually, so you can put it into Signet Breeding Services, something like that, and link it back. Recording of problematic ewes, that's another major thing you want to do. So as simple as you can go, we've got a bit of paper with, it either says cull or demotion on it, and you write the tag and the reason. You can do it with a stick reader, you can do it with whatever, but if there's a ewe causing you a problem at lambing time, you want to know about her and whether you should keep her. So keep it in there, and then what we tend to do is I'll load all the tags into the auto drafter. When the ewes run through, we'll shed them off. But if you don't have auto draft, don't have EID, use a pair of ear notchers. It doesn't have to be ear notchers are the simplest tech invented years ago, I suppose. Animal health issues are a key one. So these link into lamb losses is what I would essentially say. If you're worried, use post-mortem things, do some bloods tests prior or after lambing, but you're never going to make improvements in the live lamb side until you monitor animal health a bit closer, because they usually go side and side, that and nutrition. Accurate and equal feed requirements. Again, it's back to you can't treat lambs differently and complain when one of them's not doing as well, and then you might end up keeping that lamb that's doing better, but he's had all the best feed on the farm. So it's really getting the right feed requirements for the right stock classification. So triplets running as 3, which we do, they get fed straight after lambing for quite a while, whereas the rest of them don't get any, but the grass is kept right, and we're a very grass-based system other than on the triplets, so we're making sure we're keeping it at the right height. So after lambing, it changes a bit, and this is where our tech probably really saves us a lot of time. So 8-week weights for lambs, that gives us a baseline to see how mum's done, basically. Who's been the best mother, who's milked the best, that sort of thing. The A flock and the suffix, they're obviously linked to the dams, but the B flock is just an overall, it lets us know how the years went and thing. It's usually how well have we managed the grass, if I'm being honest. And if we've done a bad job, it goes down. If we've done a good job, it goes up. After that, a big difference we do, and the only reason we can do it is because of the auto drafter, is we're fortnightly weighing lambs after that. So every fortnight the lambs are through, we'll do about 400 an hour, 400 to 500 an hour. That lets us monitor worm burdens easily. So the best thing about that is, one, we're reducing our wormers we're using, so we're less a chance of anthelmintic resistance. And 2, if we get lambs that are fat and ready, we've not over fattened them, we're seeing them often. So that's a real bonus. But we can only do it because we've got the auto drafter, so it's not a huge job. You could do the whole farm in a day, sort of thing. Again, I just touched on grassland management. Larger group sizes, that's one of the things we do focus on. We're pretty much mob grazing. I mean, just now I've got, I think, a group of twins that are 800 or 900 using them. So I want big groups. So I'm putting a lot of selection pressure on these animals. And then it also becomes easier to treat them all the same. So you're more equal on what you're doing to them. And then there's the other fact, it's a lot easier. You might have one big day of work, but there's not a lot of little groups. Weaning time's always the best time of year. You get to cull all these annoying sheep that have annoyed you at lambing time. It's clean out time, basically. So I'm probably harder than I need to be at weaning, but lame sheep, for example, we don't have a huge problem. We've got on top of it. I think there was 2 or 3. So if I see something coming through at weaning, what's lame, if it's anything but scald, it's gone, sort of thing. So all those ones that you've done on your list from lambing, they can then be culled then. So that's the best time of year to have your clean out and think about next year. And then onto that, you're doing weaning weights from your lambs and your ewes. Now, the reason we do the ewes, you might wonder why that's a lot of work. It gives you your efficiency. And even if you've not got individuals, but if you're putting them through a crate, you probably will, you can do a batch efficiency to see if that's getting better or worse at weaning time. And then I suppose we go into ultrasound scanning, CT scanning that I touched on earlier. That happens at that time of year. Ultrasound scanning before they go to the CT scanner. So the lambs, the Suffolks, for example, will get ultrasound scanned, and that lets us see the best lambs in the group to then take to the CT scanner, which we've ended up using tips we've bred ourselves because they've been a lot better than a lot of the sheep we could buy, or they would cost us a fortune to buy the good sheep. So the CT scanner saved us a lot of money that way, and it is also subsidised by QMS. They pay half it, I think, so worth using. Right, so after that, I thought, really what you want to know is this equipment costs a lot of money, so is it going to make me any money? I did a bit of reading on the previous webinars and things, and that was something that came up. The cost was a huge problem. So what I'm going to go through, I'll go through it. But at the top, you can see in 2020, the number of ewes we had, the number of ewe lambs we had, are scan. Now, I came in 2019, I think, and the thing was I wanted to get to 185, 180, 185. That was sort of optimum for outdoor lambing, and 100, 110 with the hogs. So it was a bit of, how are we going to do that? So what I did is we were lucky in the way. Back then we had some Clins, we had some Romneys, we had some Aberfields, and I think there's a mix of a little bit of Tex on them. So we had about every maternal breed you can find within reason. So I thought that was a great opportunity. So I basically recorded all those sheep from birth to slaughter and got a great comparison of how the scanning went on each breed, how the lambing went on each breed, etc., etc. Now, the Aberfields were by far growing a lot faster, but what they weren't doing is giving me enough live lambs or scanning as well as the Romneys were. So these Romneys were the true outliers of and that was sort of the main data change that drove us to using Romneys. I suppose you'll see numbers have dropped a bit, and grassland has remained about the same. The numbers dropped basically once we started using the plate meter. So we found, yes, we were doing intensive rotational grazing, but the tail end of the season and the start of the season, we were running out of grass. So scanning time, lambing time. Lambing time we were having to supplement. Scanning time, we were dropping this percentage down. So that's what drove those changes. So what I've done is the lamb sale value, I've put inflation into that. So we did get less than that. We were selling a lot of lambs store, but I wanted to compare this, and I've pretended like on a miracle year, we have never lost any lambs so there's no loss at being wrong. So obviously you can see the two totals. Now, in 2020, if we kept the same stocking rate, we'd be carrying an additional 419 ewes. Now, at our costings, we do KPIs ourselves. This costing is obviously minus labour, things like that wouldn't affect, but just the cost to keep the sheep. The total is 19,000. So basically, we would have still had that many extra ewes on the place, costing us £20,000 for essentially nothing if we didn't have the equipment. And then onto the equipment we've got. So you can see the equipment we've purchased. I've gave it all a 5-year lifespan. I'll be annoyed if it only lasts 5 years. But essentially, some of it's been grant funded, but I taken that out and I put it full price so that anyone can afford it. Our yearly cost to have this equipment is £5,000. So when you take the total away from the total 2023 with the additional ewes saving away from 2020, that leaves us with £13,000 income straight once everything's paid off. So I hadn't actually done this sum until this webinar, but I was delighted to see it was the right way. But it just shows that it is worth spending on the equipment, and it'll get you to the places you want to be. I suppose, in hindsight, we maybe used some of the stuff we didn't need. The Agrident reader at the bottom, we don't use it now. We're on a mobile software, so there's a lot better stuff out there now. And I suppose we had a big jump to go. We had to increase scanning by 25%. You might not get that sort of gains if you were only increasing by 5%. But if you're a bit confused where you want to go, definitely spend the money on the kit. And I think that's me. Thank you very much for listening, and hope it's been interesting.
That was absolutely brilliant, Owen. Fantastic slide pack there, and really, really good to see the costing side of it as well. Really, really interesting. One question I'm just going to pull in just now, because while it's in our heads, as you spoke there about your A flock and your B flock, what percentage of your ewes is in your A flock and B flock? And once they're in the B flock, do they stay there, or do they ever merit going back into the A flock?
So I think there's about 800 in the roughly, I might get this roughly wrong, but about 800 in the A flock and about 400 or 500 in the B flock. So you can break that into percentages. They'll never go back. The only place they'll go is cull if they cause me another problem. But they've done something fairly severe to be in the B flock. So yeah, I don't want to breed from them. And a little bit, we breed our own replacements, so I don't need to breed for them. I'll just bring in more ewe lambs, sort of thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They're put into the B flock for a reason, aren't they? So to pull them back to the A flock would be a backward step, wouldn't it? Brilliant. Yep. Thank you very, very much for that. Dan,
just on that one, Kirsten.
Yeah, go for it.
So rightly or wrongly, I do 50-50 AB. And I do sometimes promote from B back to A, but I only promote a few of the top performers, and it's only if they've been put there from if they've had a bad year or something. So I do sometimes put a couple back up, but generally it's only one-way traffic.
What might be quite interesting, that you said that is we used to be about 50-50, but I found I was running out of ewes in the A flock, and I wasn't getting enough selection for the ewe lambs I needed for my criteria. So that we did used to be much the same as you, but I wasn't getting ewe lambs was the problem.
Well, we've been increasing the A flock, so we are slightly above 50% now. So I might find that I end up in the same percentages as you, Ben and I.
Brilliant. Dan, internet is not being your friend this evening, is it? So are you going to continue with or without a PowerPoint?
I'm just going to talk through the last couple of bits without my screen on, if that's all right, just to maximize the chance of it not messing up. So I was talking when we cut out about what we do. So I talked about the tagging from birth, and I was just starting to talk about the combi clamp trailer. The benefit of the combi clamp trailer for me is that we do everything through it, and we can weigh at the same time, and we can draft at the same time. And basically, with the tagging at birth, with a handheld scanner, and with a handling system where you can weigh it and draft, I think in terms of that's really the core to what you need to do 90% of what you want to do in terms of keeping track of everything. Because just by tagging at birth, just by having a reader, and just by doing this, we can weigh every animal every time we handle them. We have 8-week weights, we have weaning weights, we have all this data just pours out without actually having to do anything beyond really what you would be doing anyway. And that for us is the real benefit of doing it this way. And I think it's worth investing a bit of money in getting something that's more mobile, that's easier to set up and stuff. Because when we did it before, we used to have a combi clamp, we'd move around with the telehandler and stuff, and it just doesn't get used the same, and you really miss out on that. So I would highly recommend that to anybody else. And yeah, just touching again on the AB flock. So our AB flock is selected. It's a combination of ease of if she gives me no bother at lambing and she goes off with 2 lambs, that's, you know, full marks and she's in selection for the AFOC. And beyond that, it's a combination of, the way I do it is they have to meet a certain threshold for maternal traits. So the way I score it, she has to have 8s and 9s across the board. And then from that, I just take down the weaned lamb weight until I get to the number that I want, basically. So that's the current process. But what I'm saying is that this is still a process that I'm reviewing, something I'm looking into, seeing what I should be doing. And my final slide was just talking about where I want to go with this sort of stuff. So one of the things I need to look at is better tracking of treatments and ailments. I think, you know, in the perfect world, I'm scanning the ear tag every time I'm injecting something. I can keep track of it. But the truth is, you get busy, you don't have the scanner on you, you write down how many you've done or whatever, and a lot of that information gets lost. And sometimes that would be really good information for when it's coming to culls. Another thing is learning a bit more about identifying and monitoring cull reasons. I know there's been some interesting stuff about people culling if they have to dag, culling if they get feet problems more than once or whatever. But I think I need to spend a bit of time understanding what are the most important things I need to cut out of the business first, and start working through that. The next thing is getting very clear performance goals for each phase. So when I was talking about the different phases, I need to understand for myself, you know, what my nutritional targets are, what are the growth rates I'm expecting, and start building up that picture. And then the final thing is trying to sort of nail down my formula for maternal selection and link that into my top EPVs I'm targeting, because at the moment I'm looking a lot at what I'm doing and I'm just kind of, you know, going within this and, you know, top performing tops and just picking them. But, you know, I feel like I'm kind of guessing a little bit on that front. So I think I really do need to try and work out how to marry together a bit better. But for my, you know, I'm very early in the process. So at the moment for me, I'm still taking a lot of information from, you know, vets, from advisors, from other farmers about finding out what people think is important to monitor and the ways in which they monitor it. Because I think it's very interesting to hear different people's techniques for how they manage to capture X data or Y data, and the things that they found that were useless, the things they found that were very useful. So that's kind of the thing. I thought I've got a clear idea of the structure of what I'm trying to do, but I think I just need to fill in the gaps about you know, where I need to prioritize and where I need to capture the data, basically. So that's all I wanted to say tonight.
Brilliant. Thank you, Dan, and thank you for reconnecting with us as well. I know it's not just been the easiest with the internet this evening.
Yeah, it's not been great.
There's been a few questions coming in, and you know, some of them are really quite dual purpose. I think we're really lucky actually in the fact that Dan is at the start of the journey and indoor lambing. Owen is further down the journey and outdoor lambing. So we're really hearing all different sides of it. There was quite a few comments came in, Owen, when you were speaking about linking your reader with the scanner and it just going straight in. And people asking, is that specific to your scanner that comes, has he got the tech to do that, or is it anybody can do it? How do people go about doing that?
I suppose most people can do it. I think it's OVScan, the company who makes most people's scanners. It's been going for years. New Zealand have been doing it for a long time. For some reason, it's missed the boat. Essentially, that's better.
There we go.
Back again. Yeah, so it's fairly simple. It's a computer cable that connects the scan man's. As long as he's got an OVScan, which most of them do, it connects into the XR5000, and all it does is sends a signal of 1, 2, 3, or 4 into the XR5000 wayhead. The only thing you need to do is you need to read the use tag when it goes in. Now, I think they have tried putting panels on the side of scanners in New Zealand and thing, but the problem I think they'll find is there's a delay between the scan man pressing his button to the box, so the sheep will leave and it'll scan the next sheep. So it's better done manually for that point with a stick reader.
A huge time saver though, a huge time
Yeah.
saver. So really, really
But
good to know.
if you do have auto drafters, you can just then, it's a one-man job to run them through. You don't need any help, sort of thing.
Brilliant, brilliant. A question for both of you here, and that is like when you've just said there that you're using the XR5000, how did you go about choosing what you went for? There's a lot in the market. We saw there at the start with the kind of survey, what did we have? 10% of people logged on tonight unsure of where to start. How did you go about choosing what you were going to use for collecting your data? And then same to Dan, but we'll start with yourself, Owen.
I think it probably all starts at your software package, which we've changed over the years. I used to use Border software, which is tremendous. It gives you everything. You can put so much in it, but it's not user-friendly for more than one user, if I'm being honest. So we've moved on to AgriWeb, which we're finding really good, and it's a software that you can actually use with very little tech. I mean, if you've got a stick reader, you can record your medicines, you can do stuff like that. And then I suppose I've always had TrueTest is probably a terrible answer, but it's good. It does the job. And there is Gallagher. I'd probably try that. If I'm being honest, they're all probably much the same, but like say your bigger purchases, weigh crates and everything, we've had various ones and had problems with them. So try them out, speak to people probably is the best thing. So they're not all say what they do in the tin sort of thing.
Excellent. And yourself, Dan?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, we ended up going for an X6. That's the one that's like it almost looks like a big phone, because it's very useful at lambing time because you can have it in your hand, you can do everything on it, and it's got a very easy to use screen. But then the downside of the X6 is that when you're doing like multiple actions, trying to do like record weights, record treatments, multiple treatments, it starts to get a bit slowed down. Like that's where I sometimes wish I'd gone for the XR5000. So yeah, it's difficult because there's a lot to choose from, and then there's also not much to choose from because there's a couple of companies that really dominate the market. So yeah, that's definitely a difficult one, but I would definitely recommend not half-arsing it. I would recommend going for something that's going to do everything for you, because I think some of these sort of like halfway houses, they just put you off the whole thing because they can't do this and they can't do that. So I would definitely recommend investing a bit of money and getting something that's really up to the job.
I guess it's knowing what data you want to collect and how robust you need it to be as well. There is a massive amount of questions coming in about a flock v flock. We're going to have to address this a flock v flock. They're all asking semi-similar parts of it. So I wonder if we start with Owen, with what makes somebody manage to be in an A flock? What is the selection criteria for an A flock? And then we'll go to Dan for what makes them go into the B flock, I think. So we'll start with the A flock, Owen.
Well, essentially, our first thing is they have to get in lamb as a ewe lamb. We need them lamb their first year, and that has to be successful. So if they do not go away with a lamb as a ewe lamb, they're not going into the A flock. They'll get demoted from then. There is a risk. Do we know much about these? And I know some people do create their A flock later on, as in once they're gimmers, once they're ewes sort of thing. But I feel we've got enough data about the ewes who are breeding these replacements from birth data, from their performance data, that we are pretty confident the ewes are doing what they're doing, and we're making progress. I suppose lambing losses, for example, have gone down by 5%. So the data is going the right way, which tells me it's working. And I suppose that's a lot. Follow the data and make sure it's going the right way.
Can I ask how long are you tapping your young lambs for? Is it a super quick and one tap and that's it? Or?
I tend to give them, and maybe I should put teasers out, but I tend to give them just a full cycle sort of thing. And
so 17 days.
Yeah, it just makes it easy and keeps it simple. And I have toyed with the idea of doing teasers, but then you maybe need a bit more tipping power and thing, and just it adds an extra management problem.
So it's actually a really strict getting a lamb in one cycle as a yow lamb or you're out.
Yeah.
It's it is strict, and that's number one. Where do you go from there? So if she's successfully lambed and reared as a yow lamb,
Suppose
any other?
she's straight into the flock then, that's the sort of thing. I mean, there's other criteria, like all those yow lambs are coming from ewes that are roughly 70 kilos. Another thing I'm doing is I'm looking at scanning data, and if a ewes having a single, sorry, twice in a row, not counting when she's a gimmer because she's been the ewe lamb, she's demoted as well. So they're coming out and wanting to increase twins. We don't keep any ewe lambs from triplets because, to be honest, they cost us a lot of money. We have to run them as triplets because we're lambing outdoors. We've got slightly too many, and they're our biggest labour headache at lambing time. So there's a lot of other things that are probably done prior to being kept to disclude other ewe lambs what are never going to make the grade, sort of thing.
Okay, and we'll maybe get your B flock, and then we'll go to Dan for his ideas of A and B because they're probably quite different. So, you're demoting. I take it though when it's really severe, say it's mastitis, prolapse, then they're not even B flock, they're cull, I would take it.
Yeah, well, yeah, yes, yeah, exactly that. Mistake is if there's a really bad mother, like really, really bad, that she runs off and just annoys me, to be honest. It's so but it's things just like if they're meant to be a twin, they've got one lamb, she should get demoted, sort of thing. What else? Foot problems, if they're even if they're getting a lot of scad and things, then demote them. But anything with foot rot or anything like that, it goes. We don't have a lot of problems, so they just go. I'm pretty heavy on animal health issues, and if there's anything like that, they don't even get a chance. So the scanning one's a big one. Why we demote a lot, probably. What else do we demote for? Basically, if the sheep doesn't do what it's meant to do, the sheep's meant to rear two lambs, or if it's a single one lamb, then it gets demoted or culled is essentially it. And it's the good thing I find about, you could have multiple people doing it. So the good thing I find about putting it back on a paper list is I can analyze that after lambing. So if you've maybe got lambing staff coming in, they can write demote, but you've got a reason why, and you can decide at a later date. We used to just demote them with lug notchers, but I found we didn't know why we were demoting sheep.
Yeah. Brilliant. Huge amount of information there. Dan, what about yourself? So A flock initially, how are they getting into the A flock?
Yeah, so we don't put everything. So what we do is we lamb as hogs as well. And then what I do is I put the best performing 2/3 of the hogs into and that's just done on we don't worry too much about mothering abilities hogs because they can come into that quite easily, a lot of them. But yeah, it's literally just done on the top 2/3 of the hogs, how much lamb did they wean, they go into the A flock. And then from the yows, I've got very tight thresholds for sort of their ability to be good mothers at lambing time, because it's so definitely our pinch point. And if they're no bother, they're getting licking them, sucking them, all fine. That's what I really want. And then once that's been established, then it comes down to picking the ones that are weaning the most lamb, because that's ultimately what we're selling. I mean, I was reading something that was about it was talking about the weakness of the genetics for maternal traits, which was quite interesting. But when I spoke to my brother about it, he said that things that have weak genetic links are things that you should maybe be targeting for breeding, because things that have very strong genetic links you can get out of your flock very quickly. But the things like the maternal ability take years and years and years of selective breeding to really make a difference. So I'm going to keep going with that for now. In terms of demotions, anyone that's given me problems at lambing, is getting demoted probably if she's scoring 5s for mothering ability. And in terms of getting back up to A flock, I think it's very unlikely that a yow that's a real problem at lambing is all of a sudden going to become a fantastic mother the next year. So automatically she's going to keep, if she's gone down to B flock for being bad natured, she's probably going to stay there because I think it's quite unlikely that she's all of a sudden going to become a great mother. And yeah, also just the lack of lambs, if she's only rearing one, that's not really what we want because we lamb our triplets inside and we rear all of our pet lambs. We want to have as many, so we want lots of lambs. And from my point of view, the way that we run our system, I don't mind pulling a lamb off a triplet and rearing it myself if it means that she's rearing 2 outside herself. Because that's making the ones that are rearing 2 outside themselves are making us the most money. So that's just the way that we view it. So we don't knock them down for having too many lambs, but I don't look too much into the singles. I don't, I'll pick maybe 10% or of the singles maybe, if I'm feeling generous and take them back into A flock. But really, I'm looking at numbers. I'm looking at output of meat. And one of the things I touched on at the end is I would like to be demoting and culling more for ailments. If I could treat, I would like to get to the point that Owen's at in terms of really rooting out a lot of these problems. But just at the moment, we're trying to increase the flock size and stuff. So we're not able to be as ruthless at the moment. So that's kind of a brief overview of the AB on the farm.
Okay. And final question for the night, for both of you. If you were to start the journey from the very start again, how would you start? What would you do differently? Owen, I'll start with you.
Well, that's a good one. Probably grassland management, picked that up quicker and made sure that animals were getting the right nutrition before I got any data set. We had a good understanding of health, but I just needed to improve that. That's probably from the main overview what I'd look at. And then onto the equipment side, I probably would have broadened my horizons instead of just going narrow and tried everything at the start instead of going into one program, one bit of equipment, and then makes it really difficult to change. So basically explore everything, speak to as many people as you can and sort of thing. And that'd be the 2 differences I'd make.
And starting off with grassland management, would you go straight into a plate meter, or would you spoke about your bit of cardboard earlier with your QMS sword stick?
Yeah, well, both, to be honest. Yeah, we still use the plate meter. It's now became quite a good. We had the drought. We had, was it last 2022? It would be. We had a serious drought, and we had all this stock on the farm. We were measuring grass, but didn't know what to do with it. So essentially, the lambs taking a big hit that year. We ended up storing a lot of lambs. So using grassland management, we decided to keep we sold the steers in the spring, but we kept the steers through, so it gave us a movable stock class. So we've got stock we can just move off whenever we're measuring through the summer. Whenever the plate meter says there's not enough grass, steers can go. Whereas before, our system was just cramped, and that's how we got in trouble, really. So yeah, that's the biggest bonus, I think.
And it's relatively cheap kit that as well.
Yeah,
to start with,
walking time.
Dan, what about yourself? Starting from the start again, how would you start it, and what would you do differently from what you've done?
Yeah, I think I just got stuck in at the start and carried on doing everything. We've done it and tried to collect all this data. And I think really spending some time taking a step back and thinking about what you do and understanding what's important, what are the outputs, what are you actually trying to achieve with each stage, and then from there working out, where are the gaps in your knowledge, what do you need to know at what time of year, and use that as the basis for, once you understand, I need to know this at this time of year and I need to know this at this time of year, then going out and collecting some technology that's going to help you do that. You can have a much more meaningful conversation. because I think it is easy to jump in and buy a bit of kit and then realize it's not quite the right bit of kit, and it can take you a while to work it out, which can be a bit demoralizing, I think, at times. So I definitely think spending a bit of time, planning things, thinking about things before you jump in would be my best advice. But
Brilliant. Two fantastic answers there to sum up this evening. And as we approach lambing, it's a brilliant place to start for those who are looking to start, or to fine tune for those that are already doing. There was a question that came through there, and Dan answered it in the chat, so I think it will have shown on all your screens, but it was somebody asking, what data do you record at lambing? And Dan has answered lamb vigour, ease of birth, mothering ability, all scored 0 to 9, and the number of live lambs and the number of dead lambs per yow. And the sheet that Owen showed earlier, I worked in a project with Saughland on live lambs, and we can circulate that to everybody that's on tonight. And again, it's a great tool. It's paper, but it's fantastic. And just you can have it beside your dead bag, or somewhere that's handy, that you're passing all the time, and just keeping that tally. And it's a great way of just seeing the trends and seeing where the issues or problems are, to document, to take forward, rather than the bag being lifted up and forgetting about it, which is usually the way it works. So
just quickly on that, Kirsten, the on the handheld reader, when you have the dead lambs per ewe, it does give you aborted, stillborn, or dead before tagging. So you get a little bit of categorization, but it doesn't obviously have cause of death, because that's getting a bit too much information to record in one go, I think. So
yeah, and it's finding a way that works for you, isn't it? That works for you, and then lets you take forward the efficiency and productivity of your flock.
Another thing maybe I'll quickly mention is it doesn't always have to be really technical either. What I've started doing in years is, if there's ewe lambs that their mums become a problem at lambing time, or say there's one ewe lamb left, the other one's died, you don't want to keep that ewe lamb, just carry some slaughter dogs and put a slaughter dog in her. And even if it falls out, there's a hole in the ear, it's been a slaughter lamb. So I used to record everything on everything, but I've went to a slaughter tag system, whereas if I know I'm never going to keep that lamb, I put a slaughter tag in it, and then it never gets kept anyway, so it's never in the running.
Great tip there. Fantastic tip. I think people will be having exploding minds tonight, actually, with both of your presentations and what you've both said, and thinking about how to implement new things for the 2024 lamb crop. So thank you very much to both Owen and Dan. Thank you for putting up with technology as well, both of you, and for telling people exactly how your system works and how data works for you. So thank you very much, and thank you to everybody for tuning in this evening. Good night.